Can anyone hear me now? What about seeing me? Let's give it a minute. Hey, can anyone hear me now? All right. Looky there. Woo! I found a button that was hiding me. Okay. Let me know if the sound doesn't figure itself out. Got a pretty good connection. Uh-oh. Because I can do it like last week where I just turn my video off and just talk. Okay. Perfect. I think that solves it. Let me know if it gets weird again and I can toggle back to my other device if necessary. Okay. All right. So we're doing okay still. Excellent. Okay. So we are talking about placement of reward. What just happened? Okay. I think it made some noise. My bad. I'm really sorry. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. If you guys heard all that, that was me messing with things that I should not mess with. So I'm going to stop doing that. Okay. Placement of reward. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, dogs. That was terrible. I thought I could just in case I needed to move over, and that was a bad idea. So playing in devices is not recommended. Do that. Yeah. Placement of reward. I'm closer behind me, so if I'm turning around looking at my whiteboard, that's why. I kind of, for agility, I want to think about, I use about like 4 ways pretty frequently. And I use pre-place in 2 ways. As a lure and as a distraction. Okay, so when using a pre-placed reward as a lure, it's because I want to create the behavior. And this is maybe a little bit different or strange, but I use it because when we're talking about agility, and we're usually talking about handling and where to place the reward in handling, that's when I'm using a lure to start out. Because I want, number one, I want them to already have that cue pretty fluent. So we know that handling, if the handler's cues are, the dog's behavior is most likely going to be correct. So yeah, so when I use a pre-placed reward to begin, yeah, it's like a lure, but also the behavior should happen. The pre-placed reward just kind of gives the handler some extra confidence that it is going to happen. I also want to give the dog as much incentive as possible for taking the obstacles that the handler can always be practicing leaving. Okay, so I'm going to turn my video off. Let me know if it gets better. Okay, so with the pre-placed reward, and if it doesn't get better, I'll toggle back to the other device. basically what I'm finding is my bandwidth at home doesn't work well anymore. It used to work actually pretty decently for these lives, but it just doesn't. It's not good enough. So the pre-place reward as a lure, make sure that the behavior happens. Not really better. Okay. Hold, please. It's going to go blank like I'm gone again. Okay. What about now? So we're using a pre-placed reward as a lure. Does this work? Okay, here we are. I'm going to talk to this screen instead of this screen, but my comments are on this screen, so bear with me. And now the sun is, okay. So camera is actually on my left, but the comments are on the right. So it's just going to look a little bit weird, but it works. So we're going with it. All right, cool. Put those away. Oh, small because I'm on, it's the phone now. It's the orientation of the device. Trust me. Like it's a pain. It used to work so much better. Do you guys remember when I started doing these things and I was like screen sharing with you? It used to be so much better. Oh, wow. Okay. So I use the pre-place reward as a lure, mostly in handling, because I want to 100% make sure that the behavior that you're going to get matches the one that you're going to give the cue for. And I do this for a couple of reasons. One, I want the handler to always, with confidence, give the cue and move on to the next place. I find that a lot of times when we are adding new things to the dog's handling skills, we don't believe that they are going to do it. And when we don't believe that they are going to do it, what happens is we don't act the same. We stay around the jump, we babysit them a little bit more, we wait a little bit longer to give the information, and therefore you end up practicing the wrong thing. You end up rehearsing the wrong thing, and the dog starts observing and learning that that wrong thing is the cue that you want them to follow. And then when you try to change the cue, because now you're confident, now you're going to leave early being on time, then the dog says, well, that's different, I'm not going to take the jump. And then we get into this spiral of no one knowing what they're doing. So handling starts with a pre-placed reward as a lure. The other place that I use a lure for, like all the time now, is when I'm starting 2x2 training. And if you took my weave pole class, you know what I'm talking about. But I don't I I don't free shape the initial entry process. I make it impossible for the dog to pick any other behavior. So I start with the poles orientated in the same way, but I start with a loaded bowl that is a lure, and I start the dog right across from the bowl, and the weave poles are between the dog and the bowl. And I put the dog as close as possible to the weaves and to the bowl, that the dog cannot come up with any other behavior. And I do this to jumpstart the dog's weaving process, because if your dog likes to try a bunch of behaviors and is super operant, and operant as a label, and try not to say that because I don't actually think that way, but if your dog knows to offer behavior and tends to offer a lot of behavior, I don't want the dog to offer a lot of behavior when there's weave poles in front of him. I want him to go through the poles. So I'm just starting that process with a lure, and I'm fading the lure really quickly and getting it on more of an offered behavior. But those are the two main places that I am using a pre-placed reward, and I believe that it is functioning as a lure, but also is functioning really as the perfect placement of reward for what I'm trying to build, which is I'm trying to get the behavior that I'm after, and I want some independence on it too, as well. It's 100% still shaping, but it's not, I agree with you. I didn't really want to go down that rabbit hole, because if you are teaching in approximations, it's still shaping, but people don't think like, and so great. I'm glad it's better for Sarah to try and change the way we use these words and change the terminology, because it's all shaping, whether you lure it or capture it or free shape it with a clicker. Like, who does that? Basically, I don't leave anything up to chance, but I do believe that I'm still shaping behavior. So when I said I don't shape it, meaning I don't shape it in the way that I think the majority of dog trainers think of as shaping. And we do need to be thinking of shaping in a different way, because it's not just staring at the dog and waiting for the behavior to happen. Not when it's done well. So good note, good rabbit hole to sort of go down. I'm going to try and not, though. So then next on my list, after I've used, so now let's look, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Pre-placed as a distraction. Let's just go there. So I use pre-placed rewards as a distraction all of the time, but I want to do it in a way that I know that the dog can be successful and that it's going to make my behaviors more powerful. Okay, so when I'm thinking about handling, once I've used a pre-placed reward as a lure, I'm going to start moving that pre-placed reward towards the next obstacle, basically. In most cases, I might use it as an off-course potential, and I expect the dog to follow the handling rather than run straight to the reward. Or I might just move it further downstream so that it's closer to the next obstacle rather than the current obstacle. So the dog still has to follow my handling to get access to the reinforcer. And the challenge being that they know that the reinforcement is available and they could quickly just go straight to it, but they're choosing to follow my handling, move to the obstacle, stay committed to the obstacle, and then move away. Yes? Yes. Okay. My notes are on the whiteboard behind me, so I have to check. And I started making these notes kind of throughout the day, so that's why they're on the whiteboard. When I use it as a distraction in handling, I need to know that the dog understands that concept of following the handling. So this starts when they're very young or new to agility, and it's one of, I do it as soon as they learn about pre-placed reinforcement. I show them that it's not always just run directly to it, that following my handling will be a behavior. Okay, so assuming I've done some following the handling without pre-placed reward, so I've done some handling on the flat, and then I've also taught a pre-placed reward strategy, I immediately put that in there because I want the dog to feel comfortable and not conflicted about having to go the long way to the reinforcement on the ground. So here's an example. Torch just had like his first real session of a toy on the ground, because he's able to spit the toy out, make eye contact, and move away from the toy. So I'm like, all right, you're ready for this. I didn't film it. Don't ask, Sheila. I don't know why I didn't film it. I don't know why I didn't turn the camera on. It was really stupid. Just don't ask. It was very, very good though. So the first thing that he's learning is that it's not going to be go directly to the reward that I just left, that you're going to be asked to do something else. That first something else is just following me backwards away from the toy. And then I turn him around. He just follows me around the room. And then I tell him he can go get it, so that it's comfortable and that it's not a conflict for me to leave a toy on the ground and ask him to walk away from it and ask him to run away from it and ask him to do things before he's allowed to go back to it. So that's going a little bit down that rabbit hole, but we can go back to it when I have video of it. Question: how do you transition from a manners minder to a toy? A little bit of what I was just talking about. The dead toy on the ground requires that the dog understands when to take the toy and when not to take the toy. And so I'm using a manners minder right now for most of this training with Torch, so that I have it built up so that when I'm ready to include a toy, he already kind of has an idea of the game. Manners minders are great while you are prepping those other skills, like an open bowl of food or a toy. And I urge you to treat the manners minder as if it is an open bowl of food or a toy. Okay? Because I don't want you to judge, and here's why. The manners minder, if the dog makes a mistake or you make a mistake in your expectations of what you want, and the dog runs to the manners minder off cue, he's not going to get anything. But he is rehearsing that behavior of going to the reward that you haven't asked him to go to. So that should really be a red flag for you, saying, I made this too difficult, or he doesn't understand something about what I'm asking him to do, how I'm asking him to leave the manners minder. So I treat the manners minder, I train the manners minder exactly the same way I teach my open dish work and my toy on the ground work. I treat it the same. I think they just learn it more quickly because there's not as much conflict, because it's not accessible. They learn that they need thumbs to access it, so they can kind of let it go more easily than a bowl of food that has cookies already in it, or just a toy on the ground, right? You have a little bit more control over the manners minder. So I think the dogs just know that. They're not dumb. They know that, oh, okay, I can't just go eat from it. I have to do the thing that makes the sound and then the whir and then the food drops out. So it's a great split, but do yourself a favor and treat it like it is an open bowl of food. Because if you let the robot do all the work for you, you'll have a harder time transitioning to something more accessible. So the question is, what if you don't have the reward with you, and if they do something good, then you go get it and reward them? So that's later. That's much later, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but stashing the food or the toys away from you, that's not really a part of the teaching phase. That's going to be later on. A lot of dogs, the the toy can be too much, too high value, or how Sarah Stremming puts it, too high stakes. If they're desperate for it, you're going to have a harder time controlling the situation. Okay. So I think that kind of covers using the pre-placed reward as a distraction in handling. There's quite a few foundation pieces to it. Okay. But it does make your behaviors more powerful in the long run. Then you also can use your pre-placed rewards as a distraction to your obstacle training. Okay, so let's go back to the weaves for just a second. I start with that lure of the food in the bowl. And then as I'm training, I leave the bowl on the ground. It'll be empty for a while, or if the dog has really good skills, it can be loaded. But I'm using, as the entries get more difficult, the dog eventually has to bypass the bowl in order to enter correctly and weave. So I want the dogs to have that concept from a very early stage in their weave pole training, because entries are a discrimination exercise. Don't take this gap, take this gap. So when we're training them, and I use the bowl in this way, and they learn from the very beginning to not go directly to the bowl, which is kind of where pole gap number 2 would be between poles 2 and 3. The bowl is there, and the dogs might want to go straight to the bowl. That's like entering in gap 2 at pole 2 and 3. If they're learning, no, access to reinforcement has always been through gap 1 to get to the bowl, they're going to remember that when you put a second set of weave poles there. And now they already understand how to pass the bowl and go through the correct gap to get to the bowl. So it's really powerful that way, and I like using it that way. So that's another example of how it started as a lure and it becomes a distraction. We can also use the pre-placed reward as a distraction in your contact training, right? It's stopped or running, really, because we want the dogs to be moving forward, powering forward, looking forward, and it's more ring sustainable. We want the dogs to be able to, if we're talking about stopped contacts, we want the dog to be able to stop and hold their position even with something that they want in front of them. And so if we start with a reward that they want in front of them, that's going to be much easier to transfer and teach them to still stop when there's a tunnel in front of them or their favorite obstacle in front of them. So using it as a distraction there also makes it more powerful later on, because when you have control over what they want, you're going to have a better outcome, right? Control over the reinforcers. They know how to access the reinforcer out in front of them that they want. It's going to make that behavior really, really strong. The other thing is that what it's going to do for you is it's going to be a lot more ring sustainable than you bringing the food back to them or bringing the toy back to them in position, right? In a competition, you're never going to go to them and reward them. You're always going to be wanting them to access reinforcement via the next obstacle. So if the expectation is that the dog will be moving forward to get their reinforcement, it's going to be a lot easier to transfer that to the competition ring. Whereas if you're constantly feeding them or tugging with them on the contact obstacle, and that's their expectation, then you're going to have an issue, right? But remember, we're talking about using it as a distraction, so we already have the behavior. So we're just kind of proofing that behavior. We're enhancing that behavior. We're not teaching that behavior right now. Hopping over to the questions. My dog really wants a toy. If I have it on me, if I put the toy on the ground, he runs to it. So these are, you do have to teach those, the skills, and it's its own class. I mean, Shade Weitzel is the toy guru. Everything that I think I know, I think I learned from her. I'm not sure if I knew anything about toys before I start. I mean, I knew stuff, but I don't know. I really feel like I know stuff now, and so I learned it from her. And we're going to talk about this next, about kind of dropping rewards on the line or rewarding from hands. I think it's really important for dogs to understand when reinforcers are accessible to them, so that you can move through an agility course with reinforcers on you, and that the dog isn't trying to mug you for them. But both of those things are kind of like the same issue. He doesn't know when he should be allowed to go take the reinforcer and when not. Oh, good. Thanks for the question to bring me back to running contacts. How does it work with running contacts to use the reinforcer on the line as a distraction? It's the same thing, really. I teach running contacts as a target behavior. So I need the dog to touch the target regardless of what I'm doing and what the next obstacle is. So sometimes we see a lot of dogs get excited by the sight of a tunnel, or if the next obstacle is a jump, and so the dog's head comes up and the dog starts thinking about the jump before they've committed to hitting their contact target. And so that, using the pre-placed reward, I can do it in the same way. I can see when the dog has chosen to hit their target, and I can mark that decision. And so then they hit the target, and then they can go to the next thing. So we're building that behavior of commit to the thing and stay committed to the thing, and then you can move on to the next thing. So that's how it's working in my head for running contacts. And I don't know if I articulated it very well, so ask another question if I didn't. Okay. Tossed on the line, dropped on the line, thrown on the line. These are different things for me. I'm going to say that absolutes I try to avoid. What I also try to avoid is throwing rewards in handling. So throwing rewards forward. This is what I see. What I usually see when rewards are being thrown forward is that the handler is starting to slow down or stop, and the handler throws the reward forward. So what the dog sees is that the handler's coming to a stop, so slowing their motion down, but the toy or food toy is being thrown forward. And so now the dog is being put into extension while the handler is standing still. I see this with balls and frisbees the most. I also will see dogs land an obstacle, and if they think that was the last obstacle, they'll start doing that frisbee run where they're running forward with their head back. And if you're a border collie, it's crouchy and weird. And eventually I start seeing that when the handler goes to cue a turn. It's not the last obstacle. They've just slowed down to try and cue a turn. And the dog's like, oh yeah, the toy's coming out here. Let me do that creepy, weird crab walk thing that I do. So I'm not a huge fan of throwing rewards and handling. Not a huge fan. unless you're going to continue chasing down that reward with the dog. So it might be something that I do with a young dog, trying to create a lot of forward momentum if that puppy needs it. There's a lot of puppies that don't need it, that get that and then wow. So if the puppy needs it, I might use it, but I would be chasing that toy down with the puppy. I wouldn't be throwing the toy forward and standing still. In handling, I really like to drop the reward on the line in front of the dog so that it's coming down and the dog is like a stride or two away from it and it's on the line. So it hits the ground before the dog gets there. It's almost like a dead toy. It's by the time the dog gets to it, it should be dead. And I want to be able to keep moving while my dog picks that up. Just so during that whole procedure, the dog is seeing, oh, I'm turning nicely and coming to the line while the handler is running. Because this is another kiss of death thing. If you stop to toss the reward on the line, what the dog is seeing is that, oh, my handler stops moving. That's when I turn. And then they have a really hard time turning nicely when the handler is in motion. I'm glad it was a great point. I'm not 100% sure which one, but hey, I'll take any thing for great point. Probably about the moving forward bit, since there's a little bit of a delay in the comments usually. Anyways, thank you. Or I will toss it back. I will toss it back to the dog so that it's closer to the obstacle than forward. Closer to the obstacle than closer to me. I lost the thought and then I was seeing it in my head and the words came back. So I think I have anyways, I have the example in my head. I have to see if I have a video of it. So tossing it back to the dog would mean that as I see the dog commit and I go to move away, I'm going to mark and toss the reward very close to the obstacle so that as soon as the dog lands the obstacle, it's there for them so that they can grab it and be reinforced while again, they are seeing me move away. Because remember, everything from the time of you marking to the time that they collect reinforcement is getting reinforced. So you want them to see that picture of you running away and you continuing to run away while they're getting that ding, ding, ding moment in their heads. Okay, so tossing back towards where the dog is landing or dropping it on the line in front of them so that it is dead before they get to it. Those are the ways that I'm looking at rewarding on the line in handling. All the while I am moving ahead. And if you are in the handler mechanics class, we're going to practice this in week 6. Are all of these reward mechanics without the dog. If you are terrible at tossing rewards, well, you're already getting practice at it this week. You just don't know it because I've described it as some other exercise. But then in week 6, we are going to practice the reward strategies and the reward mechanics of these things. Because I know when I was teaching group classes, teaching in person, I could just do it for the student. But now teaching online, the students don't have me there to toss the rewards where the rewards need to be tossed. And to train really well on your own, you need to be able to toss the rewards where the rewards need to be tossed. So those are the 2 ways. Cricket's favorite reward is a ball, so I'll try and place it better. You mostly just don't, I don't usually want to see the chasing the ball behaviors in agility. So it just depends. Now, here's the caveat to that. Shrek really likes just chasing his frisbee. I will 100% use that, just throwing the ball or the frisbee mindlessly just for some back and forth retrieve between repetitions, right? Because that's fun for him. He did a good job. I want to kind of elongate the reward strategy before we go back to work. I want to maybe, increase his arousal, give his brain a break from the work. So I'll do some frisbee tossing to the side, but I don't think it's directly reinforcing any one specific behavior. It's just kind of reinforcing his ability to be there and to have a good time with me. So that's completely different. If your dog enjoys that, do that in between repetitions. Maybe that's how you transport back and forth. And also, Cricket's not a sticky, stocky, bullshit border collie. I can say that about them because I have them, and that's their behavior. So you might be just fine to toss the ball forward with Cricket while you stand still, because she's like, you're not, you would have to do it so much to tip her in that direction of the sideways crawl, right? So it just depends. So of course, everything is train the dog in front of you, but in general, I try not to just wing the ball out as the reward for the last obstacle, because you got to be so super clear that the dog understands that the last obstacle is the last obstacle. If they get confused about which obstacle is the last obstacle, then you get that weirdness. And using the marker helps so much more. 100%. Okay. Tossing the reward back, dropping the reward on the line when it comes to obstacles, I'll do it kind of the same way, because if I'm handling with obstacles in mind, I'm handling. So even if it's so sometimes maybe if I'm just trying to keep the balance really well, I talked about how I would much prefer to reward away from the obstacle when I'm doing stopped contacts, but maybe the balance is getting shifted a little bit too much forward, and the dog is now, Shrek is stopping for off the dog walk rather than 2 on 2 off on the dog walk. So then I would want to balance that with some reinforcement close to him, but I don't want to go give it to him. So I might toss it to him on the contact and then release him to it from there. Things like that. I might use his catch cue to toss him a cookie while he's in 2 on 2 off position while I'm still running forward, just to balance the forward reinforcement strategy with stay put reinforcement strategy. So that might be a way that I would use tossing back the reinforcer. Same with a little bit of the weaves. If I want to create tighter exit lines in the weave poles, I'm going to reward closer to the weave poles than further ahead. Things like that. Yeah, I think that basically covers it. But the majority of it, I want to use the dropping on the line, tossing on the line, especially at the end, because I don't want to create these dogs that when we're done running, they come to my front and stare up at me, because that's going to eventually creep backwards in your behaviors. They'll start taking the last jump, bending over, curling in, coming towards you. I see this a lot in tunnels, actually, that if you end a sequence on a tunnel and then reward the dog for coming to your front and just reward from your hand out of the tunnel, well, then you create a dog that comes out of the tunnel looking up at you. all the time because they're not sure if this is the last tunnel and the reinforcer's coming or not. So those are just all things to think about. If you have that dog that comes out of the tunnel looking through, it could be their natural tendency. It could also be that you've created it through reinforcement history, things like that. Okay. Yes. When we are talking about, I want to go back to, it does make all of those location specific markers essential. I'm so glad you mentioned it. I 100% feel like these skills make our jobs that much easier in the long run. That if we take the time to build these skills, we can get the behaviors that we're looking for more quickly. And so we don't feel like it was time wasted. We didn't fall behind while we were teaching all of those marker cues, because I know the agility world, we all want to get out there and get everything done, and we want to get competing. And even if we're not in a rush, we want to get going, and because it's fun, it's addicting. I'm addicted to it too. But if I go to teach something and I don't have a way to reward it effectively, I can't teach it, not effectively anyways. So then I have to ask myself, well, do I want to teach it kind of shoddy? This is going to be sketchy if I try to do this without the optimal reinforcement strategy. So do I want to keep going, or do I want to sidestep and teach my dog how to collect the reinforcement that they need? That's just my reality. So running, oh, wait, I lost some comments. Guilty of flinging the ball at the end. She gets it and runs off, which is now a huge problem. Right. So then you have to pivot, right? So you have the options in that case. Do I have another reinforcement strategy that gives me the same, that fills the same function, right? Can you use a food toy or a food robot or something like that that gives you the same behavior that you're after, gives you the same reinforcement strategy that you're offered, but that doesn't also come with we're going to call them garbage behaviors of it ruins your loop, right? If they run off with the ball and they're like, haha, see ya, you can't get another repetition in, or you have to be okay with getting one repetition in and calling it a day, or, calling it, if you can go out and do one rep every half hour when they decide that they would bring the toy back, well, that's fine, I guess. It's not the most efficient way to train, but if you've got that time, you've got that time. So it becomes that when you go down a training path and you don't have the way to reinforce that you would like to reinforce, you have that choice to pivot and teach that reinforcement strategy, or try and walk through the mud in your flip-flops. I like that analogy. I like it, and it doesn't matter if you like it. Yeah, loops break. I wanted to, before we go on, one more thing about tossed on the line. And I think the timing of your click, so the timing of when you mark that reinforcement is going to be available, whether you're tossing it back to them or dropping it on the line in front of them. I think that there needs to be two ways we think about this. One, we need to be able to mark when they commit. Pop quiz, what is commitment? It's okay. Commitment is the dog selecting the obstacle. They've looked at it, they've chosen it. And I want to be able to, especially if I'm rewarding back at the obstacle, I need to be able to mark before they take it, or I'll be late. The toy won't get there in time. The food won't get there in time. So I need to be able to mark when they select it and toss that reward back to them before they take off. And I need them to stay committed while that happens. And that is an advanced skill. That can't happen if they don't understand these reward processes. I say advanced skill because it's a difficult concept, but I teach it when they're really young, just starting out. It's like one of the first things I do to teach agility is that keeping commitment exercise. When I'm dropping it on the line ahead of them as I run away, I'm probably marking later after they've landed and they've made the decision to turn and come to the new line. Then I'll be like, yeah, that was good decision, you, and drop that reward on their line a lot further ahead. So those are my things. So if you're worrying about what running away with the toy means, ask yourself, what is normal? When you go out and you play if you play your fetch game that you've probably taught, when you go out to play that and there's no work involved, what does your dog's return look like? Okay, if it looks great, add in something that you know is super easy or that you suspect is super easy for your dog to do. Today for Torch, it was down. I added a down in between the chase. And sometimes it was pretty good. He gave me an effort every time I asked. Sometimes he gave me this weird like sit thing, and sometimes he gave me his thinking sit. He doesn't have any sit on cue. So the fact that he was giving me any response, I was like, all right, there's something going on in there where I'm fine with it. Versus when I could see him getting a little bit tired, he would look away and kind of look around. And I knew he was looking for another toy on the ground. Like, is there another way to get this party started, or is down the only option? I could just see him thinking. And so then I knew, okay, this is too hard. So I could reset. So you have to know normal and then go from there. No, it is not 1 centimeter from the takeoff point. It is not. She commits further back than that now. Tell a different story. Love you. That means if you ask them to take a jump or a tunnel and they don't, then they aren't committed. So there's that. If they looked at it, in my mind, they have committed to it. If then you go to move away and the dog follows you, they have now broken commitment. And that just means we need more work on those keeping commitment skills. So it's two different concepts. Okay. So when do we want a reward from our hand? Maybe we want to reward our hand when we're teaching some behaviors like obstacles, things like that, because it's quick and it's precise and we're just trying to create behaviors. I reward from the hand all the time when I'm trying to create behaviors like my teeter and my dog walk and things like that. I'll also reward from my hand when I'm teaching my running contacts, because I need the dog to still know that I'm a part of the picture, that they're allowed to ignore that I'm a distraction, because I need the dog to still hit the target even though I'm over to the side holding all the goodies. I need the dog to still learn to commit and stay committed to their target while I'm over there holding their food or their toys. So we have that same skill again of I need the dog to be okay with moving away from me to do something, even though I hold all the goods, right? So, because that's what agility is. You are a big resource. You are their main access to reinforcement, and you are constantly asking them to move away from you to go do something else before coming to you for reinforcement. So that concept, that needs to happen. They need to understand that leaving you is okay. That coming back to you will still get reinforcement. And that's also why I have these other strategies of tossing reinforcement back to them, so that it's not so much conflict in you running away. Then they get, oh, okay, even though all the reinforcers are with my handler, sometimes my reinforcers find their way into my mouth without me having to chase her. And it's okay, I can be patient. So teaching them a little bit of patience that way. Whereas if they always have to come to you, it might cause some conflict about going away from you. So you want to have a balance. But we still need them to come to us. So we do need to reward at our bodies a certain amount. That amount's going to be different depending on every dog, yada, yada, yada. But it does need to happen. And remember, there's two different ways that I might reward, whereas the dog is allowed to move. So the dog's coming from me. So when I'm teaching the dog how to slow down, I'm rewarding from my hand, because I don't want them thinking about the obstacles. I want them thinking about slowing down. So I reward them from my hand. When I'm teaching the obstacles and I want to reward the position, I want them to stay put in that position, and I want to bring the reward to them and things like that. Those are kind of the times that I'm rewarding from my hand. Going over here to the question. Obstacle focus and super fast. So you came in at a good time, because we were just talking about rewarding from the hand, and that's going to build some more handler focus. But yeah, listen to the whole thing, because it all applies, because I also toss rewards back to those dogs that need more handler focus. I drop the rewards on the line for those dogs. It's not, oh, my dog is too obstacle focused, do this. There's a lot involved in that. On the platform, can we elaborate on that question into I don't know what you mean. Okay. And then finally, the last way I would reinforce is they're stashed somewhere off the course. They're not on your body. They're not on you. They're not accessible at that moment. You have to go get them. We need that for competition. We need that we need that to be able to tell the dog, hey, look, this is one of those times where we're going to go do a bunch of things, and then we're going to exit and get a really cool thing. And I want to teach that concept again from when they're very young, when they have just a few behaviors. I mean, so I do it just kind of in their lives. I don't walk around with my pockets full of cookies, but I do have cookie jars around my home. So if the dog is doing something great and I want to reinforce it, I can mark and we can go to a cookie jar together and reinforce that behavior. So they're learning that concept away from agility, like all the time. I do it their entire lives. It helps, rather than the dog always coming to you and wanting to do things because you have cookies in your pocket. It's a difference in the dog's engagement level too, I think. So yeah, when you've got some behaviors that are ready, that you think the dog has some really a robust reinforcement history for, you can start to train those behaviors without the reinforcers directly on you and off to the side somewhere. Could be super easy. They could just be on the table next to you rather than in your pocket. You can start really simple. And then they're in the next room, and you have to, if the cookies are in the kitchen, you go to the living room, you do a behavior, you go back to the kitchen and get rewarded. super easy, but it is a super important concept that we need for competition. Oh yeah, reward from hand on the station for sure. Yeah, I would. Okay. Do you use dish for going to the cookie jar? I can. So the difference between, so like I think I posted a ring prep session in the group just recently in the, last few weeks. And I did use his dish as the cookie jar. The difference is if I say dish, he can access it on his own. So he should run to the bowl and eat. And if it requires thumbs, so if it requires me to get it for him, it's cookies. So in that video a few weeks ago, I was using his bowl because that's what I had available. I could also just use the bag of food. And I left the bowl on the table and I marked cookies. So you could see him, he would run right over to the table. He could have put his head in the bowl, but he knew not to because I said cookies, and cookies requires thumbs. It's just the rules. I've been doing, when working the small space setup, I go with the perfect. So especially if you're wanting to build competition behaviors up and get that reinforcement history for like just duration of working, having the reinforcers off you is a good way to go. When you toss them treats, do you toss them in the dirt? I did when I worked, when I am training in dirt. Yeah, I toss them in dirt. I mean, it does limit what I use. I have to have, treats that are visible. You have to have something that they'll still eat, even if it gets a little bit dirty. But yeah, you just toss them. They eat it. If they want it, they'll eat it. But otherwise, if they are a little bit pickier and they're not interested in eating off the dirt, then I use food toys. And we just have to teach them how to use those tools, that they are food, that they are ways to access food. Because my final thought is that we have to build these strategies in a way that the dog is able to predict them. When the strategies are predictable, they are more powerful. If the dog never knows when reinforcement is coming from and where it's coming from, you're going to get to a hot mess express a lot faster. So locations, like the words that I use, location specific marker just means that you've named what and where the reinforcer is and is coming from. Okay. So for example, I say, yep, for come eat from my hand. You are able to move from wherever you are and come eat from my hand. Good is stay put. I'm going to bring food to your mouth. Chase is chase the frisbee, chase the toy, watch it leave my hand, chase it down, pick it up, bring it back. Get it is grab the toy that's on the ground in front of you. Catch is I'm gonna throw something to your face, you better catch it. Things like that. It just needs to be words or sounds that you can remember, so that you consistently use the same word or sound when you're delivering that reinforcer. They become powerful enough that when I was beginning, if I said the wrong word, like if I said a food word and produced a toy, Shrek's face would be like, that's not what you said, and that's a little disappointing. It also, this is it's really funny, but Shrek is kind of, he has pretty good food drive, but he's picky about what food he eats. So he doesn't think things that like fruit and vegetables aren't food. They're not meat. So only meat is food. And so I can get him to eat fruit and vegetables via his marker cues. If I just hand him a blueberry, he won't eat it. But if I tell him chase, he'll go chase the blueberry down, pick it up, bring it to my hand. And then if I say, yep, and hand him a blueberry, he will swallow that blueberry. He'll take it because I asked him to. I said it's coming. I said food's coming, and he trusts that yep means food is coming. And he'll eat things he doesn't want to eat because that's what it means. It's really, really fun. It's kind of funny. Okay. Any final questions? I think I talked about all the obstacles, some handling scenarios. I will, while you guys are talking about your questions, keep your questions coming. I'm going to talk about the Patreon page just a little bit. The 2 different tiers. The first tier, just base supporter of this page, keeping content flowing. When you ask questions on the Patreon page, I'm going to put those at the top of the list for what these chats are like, what graphics I put out, what videos I put out are going to be based on the patrons' questions first. If the patrons' questions I'm caught up on, or there's not a lot of questions flowing, then I'm going to turn to the group. But we're going to prioritize what the patrons are asking there in that base group. You also get access to some extra videos and things like that as they come up. The higher level tier on Patreon, you're going to get all of those things that I just talked about and access to an additional once a month live training. And April, the live training is going to be on collection, like teaching it and the mechanics behind getting the dog to slow down and collect, and the handling. And if I can, I'm going to try and set that up as a live demo on the agility field. So we'll see. So check out the Patreon page if you are interested. There's some questions. Oh, the queue list. Yeah, I can drop the queue list in the group. Because yeah, it can be really hard sometimes. Awesome. Definitely. And that's another great point. If you have questions that come up either later, you've kind of digested what I've said, or you go back and you listen, and you are a patron, put them in the Patreon page, because it helps me either follow up and give you guys access to more content to kind of fill in some goals, some gaps, and for future things. And it also helps me when I'm explaining this information in the future. If I know what questions came up from how I explained it the first time, it means I'll get better at explaining it then next time. So your questions are really valuable to me and everyone around you, past, present, and future. Excellent. So thank you for everyone who has already signed up as a patron. That's really cool. That's really exciting to me that you all love this group so much and love this page and want to keep it going. I really, really, really appreciate it. All right. If there are no more questions, I shall release you to the rest of your day, evening. I think if you search on Patreon, it's Synergy Dogs, and I'll post the link in the group. Okay. And if, like I said, if more questions come up, post them either on the Facebook group or on the Patreon page if you're there, and we'll try to get it answered for you. All right. See y'all later.